Okay. All right. Hey guys, I am Null Sleep from 8-Bit Peoples. I'm going to be talking today about chip music and chiptunes. The name of the talk is Square Wave to Heaven. I can't take credit for any cleverness in that, though. It's actually suggested by a friend of mine from Chicago who goes by the name Sasquatch, who also does some chip music stuff. So let's get started. And first question, what is chip music? I think the best description I've seen for it that sums it up nicely and in a short amount of space is music composed by using, emulating, or sampling digital sound chips. And a Swedish C64 musician that goes by Go280 is the one who said this. So what does that mean? Basically, it means that you are either using old machines and directly using their sound chips as synthesizers, or you are sampling small bits of waveforms, so one frame of a square wave, one frame of a triangle wave, something like that, and using that as a looped sample in your tune. Or, you know, in some cases now, people are just sampling old video game sounds and incorporating them with other types of electronic music genres. Where the line is drawn in what is chip music and what isn't totally clear. Different people have different feelings. But what ties it all together is the distinctive sound set that you're working within. There's also a unique attitude that's held by a lot of the participants in the community, and that is that the chip music is often very non-commercial in nature. There have been commercial releases on vinyl, on CD, and so on, but for the most part, it's music that is released for free through the web or at parties, and the releases, if they are released sometimes on CD, are also very often very cheap do-it-yourself releases, CDR labels and things like that. This doesn't mean that chip musicians aren't serious about what they're doing. A lot of the times they're very serious about it. But because of the roots of the genre, well, maybe not a genre, but we'll get into that later. Because of the roots of chip music, there is a very deep-running attitude about making things free or making things open to everyone. The tools to make chip tunes or chip music are also usually free or cheap, relatively speaking, in terms of in comparison to other types of electronic music. A lot of the times, the software will be released for free. And if there's hardware that's necessary, it will also, obviously you can't release hardware for free, but people will provide you with schematics for how to build it yourself and things like that. I think the general attitude is about openness and sharing of knowledge in the chiptune scene, and there's less ego involved in the community than with other forms of music. So you have more of a sense of camaraderie with everyone else that's involved. And just to clarify something that is a very common misconception, probably not among people in this room, but in the general public, chip music is not about remixing video game music at all. So when you go to a chiptune show, the worst thing you can possibly do is scream out something like, "Play Tetris," or "Play Contra." And I can't tell you how many times I've heard stuff like that. And at first, I would brush it off, but now if you scream that, I'll fucking rip your head off. All right, so let's see. Did you go to the next one? All right. Areas of focus. So 40-minute talk, I can't cover everything in the chip music scene. I'm going to sort of go with my personal bias and try and limit things to hardware-specific chiptunes, for example, SIDs, NSFs, things like that, and sample-based track chiptunes such as mods, IT, XM, Screen Tracker modules, etc. There's obviously a lot more out there than what I'm going to talk about today. So, chip music as a false genre. This is what I was hinting at a little bit before, and the question is chip music a genre? And I would say the answer is probably no. The basis of categorization is for people calling chip music or chiptunes a genre is that they all use the same sound set. Those sort of lo-fi, square waves and bleepy tones. But if you're going to use that as the basis of categorization for a genre, then you might as well lump rock, blues, and metal together and call it guitar music. I mean, it's the equivalent. So referring to the genre, referring to chip music as a genre is really misleading because you have an extremely wide range of styles within the chip music scene. So you have to keep that in mind when you listen to a chiptune and you say, or if you listen to a handful of them and you say, I don't like chip music, it sucks. You might have only heard one style of chip music, and you might hear something else that is completely different and appeals to you. So we have a growing scene and I think increasing visibility over the past few years, and there may come changes with that. As the scene grows, people might become more knowledgeable about the differences within it, and you might see different genres actually emerging within chip music. In fact, there's a guy, has anyone here heard of a band, German band, Bodenständig 2000? So Dragan Espenshade from Bodenständig actually was working on trying to come up with different names for all the genres within the chip music scene a while ago, and I don't think he ever finished this or released it, but I managed to get my hands on a copy of some of the notes he was taking. So I'm just going to read off a couple of these, and I think they're pretty clever. So one of them is Jump and Run, Super Mario, Sonic style, incorporated sound effects or jumping or collecting coins and rings. So you have your basic, you can have just a basic electronic music track and then throw in those little sort of cliche sound effects, and you suddenly have a chip music jump and run track. Geekcore, spelled G33KC0RE. Hardcore rave and chip metal, classic rave arrangements, heavy basses, GABA shouting. Extreme arpeggio, this is one of my favorite definitions for a chip music genre. Extreme arpeggio, very French style, developed by the Paris Micromusic HQ. Arpeggios as a very distinctive technique of chip music to create the illusion of several tone harmonies on a single tone channel are applied to the complete song. Very hardcore. So arpeggios are often used in chip music, but these guys in Paris have a tendency to really fucking use arpeggios a lot. Sega Metal, anyone who's played a lot of Genesis or Mega Drive games, I'm sure knows this style. What are some other good ones? Pro Tracker Italo, one of my favorite chip music genres, actually. Emotronic. Aggro Cute, which is reference to high-frequency, fast square wave melodies that are not balanced by lower or middle frequencies in the arrangement. Usually octave bass lines originate in piezo beepers for handheld games or Tamagotchis that can only play one note at a time. Gets on many people's nerves, others cannot live without it. And it goes on, but basically you get the idea. There's a wide range of styles within the chip music scene. So to classify chip music as a genre itself is a bit misleading for most people. Okay, so moving on to the origins of chip music. I'm sure a lot of you are probably somewhat familiar with this, so just going to talk a little bit about it. I think, and this is also open to debate, everything in this talk is basically personal opinion, and there's some wiggle room here and there. I may be wrong about things, or you may disagree, but the way I see it, there are two main routes to chip music, and that's video game music. So soundtracks of early arcade games or console games, where you basically were limited in the number of channels you could use, and there was no samples that you could use. And of course, the demo scene, where you had productions that were being made with graphics, and of course, at first you were just adding your graphics to the beginning of games you cracked and released. And then as those crack throws became more and more elaborate, you wanted to add music and show off a little bit more, so that's where the chiptune music came in. And a lot of the times the early ones were just ripping music from games and would use that as the soundtrack, but then people started wanting to write their own music. So what's the underlying theme that both of them share? It's about overcoming the limitations that you're working within and doing the most that you can with the little you have to work with. The hardware was slow. You were only offered maybe between 3 and 5 channels to work with. So when you only have three channels to work with, you need to cram as much as you can into those 3 channels, and you need to use all the tricks that you can think of in order to trick the listener into hearing more than 3 channels. How was chip music made in the beginning? So when video games, when C64 games were just starting, obviously, your own Tell didn't pull out, a tracker from the company he was hired from and write the music for the game. He had to code the sound engine himself. He had to figure out how to make that sound engine optimized enough so that it could actually run with the graphics of the game and the game logic running along with it. And that's a lot to ask of a C64. So the early chip music was made basically by hand coding assembly or machine language. Fortunately, you don't have to do that anymore. There are tools that have become available recently, in around the mid-'80s. In 1986, I believe it was, a guy by the name of Carson Obarski released Soundtracker, which was the first Amiga tracker, or I think the first tracker in general, the first Amiga tracker. And he created the mod file format, which I'm sure pretty much everyone in the room is aware of. Soon after that, it was disassembled, and this was probably one of the most important events in the chip music scene, the fact that this program had been disassembled, because now people started taking that source code and creating their own trackers. So this led to a proliferation of trackers, which in a lot of cases improved upon Obarski's Soundtracker. So one of the most important was ProTracker for the Amiga. In a few years later, in 1980,